Hello and welcome to the next part in section 4. This is lecture 12. We'll cover the Empire Regency periods. Part A will cover textiles and innovations. Okay, let's do some historical and social context first. The word Empire. Now remember, there are very many other empires. There's the Roman Empire, there's the Ottoman Empire, there's the Klingon Empire. Empire is not just a sort of pretentious way of saying empire in French. It specifically covers the years 1789 to 1820. It is a type of style. So that is why we say empire instead of empire. So if you say empire, that's fine. We won't judge you on that. But from now on, it is empire. Okay, it's named after Napoleon Bonaparte of France's. Rule also includes the rule of England under the Prince of Wales, characterized by an increased interest in neoclassical themes, and it begins with Louis XVI reconvening the Estates General on May 5th, 1789. So the monarchy managed to hang on to power till 1792. Then they were replaced by the French Republic. Louis and Marie Antoinette were executed in 1793. Threatened by foreign powers of all sides, an internal revolt. A lot of the nations of Western Europe were not comfortable with the idea of the street rabble, as they saw them, beheading heads of state, particularly kings. So they attacked, or they tried to suppress and invade France and set up an aristocracy and a monarchy once again. At this time, we have radical leaders known as Jacobins instituting the reign of terror to deal with both enemies, both foreign and domestic. Many suspected of treason were arrested and usually had a date with Madame Guillotine. Street fighters known as sans culottes patrolled the streets looking for any supposed infractions. There was finally a coup. The regents were overthrown in a coup by the Directoire, an assembly of 5 men. The Directoire continued to fight most other European nations, and they had a promising artillery officer from Corsica named Napoleon Bonaparte, who took over the overseeing of the army. Not many people know this. Well, maybe they do. I don't know. Napoleon is Corsican. He's born on an island out in the middle of the Mediterranean. He's not French, really. He speaks French pretty good, but he's not a native-born Frenchman. But he's a genius, military genius, and he is thirsty for power. In 1799, he took part of a group that overthrew the Directoire, and then became one of 3 consuls, dictatorial rulers, of which he was the first, had enough of that, and said, you know what, I'm going to be the sole emperor of France, and no one can stop me. And he was right. He was coronated by the Pope. He remained the head of France until 1815, when he was defeated 1815, defeated by Wellington at Waterloo, exiled to the island of St. Helena, where presumably he was poisoned with arsenic by a French aristocratic-leaning patriot. In England, George III. Remember George III from the days of the American Revolution? Nice guy, not very interested in being a king. He suffered from this blood disease, porphyria, which caused mental disorders. You might remember a movie about 10 or 12 years back, The Madness of King George, which talks about his bouts of mental instability. And when that happened, his son, the Prince of Wales, acted as the Prince Regent. And disability became permanent in 1810, and the Prince Regent took over until the king's death in 1820, and the prince, George Augustus Frederick, was crowned King George IV. So, France and England are the superpowers during this period. They're the 2 strongest Western forces by far, as well as being implacable foes. England, steadfast, stay the course. Don't want these fussy revolutions getting in the way. And France, of course, was free-spirited. They had the ideas of liberty, equality, fraternity, all those things. A little bit more freer, a little bit more innovative, but also could be cruel at times, obviously. Just quickly, the Directoire. During the Directoire, the government eased its hostility against the upper class because they need the money. So we start to see, after the Reign of Terror, these young, flamboyant groups of well-to-do younger women come back, and they are sort of rebelling against the old order. They would form these social groups called Incroyables, the Merveilleuses, the Muscadines, who would kind of, you can see, dress up very fancifully there, sort of like English macaronis. Napoleon, for his part, intentionally cultivated a connection between his empire and the Greco-Roman classical past, particularly the Roman Empire. So it was a conscious look in architecture, decoration, and fashion based on ruins and statues of antiquity. So Empire style was a conscious choice. As you can see, a chair there that is modeled on a Roman campaign chair. Jacques David, the painter. Here, you can see these classically themed, beautifully done paintings. So we start to see this interest in neoclassical, but almost a direct copying or inspiration from Greco-Roman themes, particularly the Roman Empire. In England, these styles were copied because they look really nice, but they're not going to call them Empire. They call them Regency. So that's why this section is Empire/Regency. The Prince Regent was very stylish. He had very good taste. He was a trendsetter. He had his own sort of social group, though he didn't give him a fanciful name, of fashionably, artistically sensitive young men, known as dandies, interested in fashion, style, and wit. His chief fashion advisor was Beau Brummel. You can see here, kind of the epitome of the well-dressed dandy. Okay, quickly, fashion innovation, cotton muslin, plentiful from England, India, and America. It was a very good fabric for materials because it was good for imitating the drapery found on Greco-Roman statues. Muslin could be woven with gold or silver thread, very popular for evening wear, very fluid. So unlike previous outfits where you have gold and silver in, they're going to be sort of, static and kind of brittle and very rigid. The muslin is more diaphanous, it's flowing. Also, it takes printing very well. Two types, block and roller. Very simple, block, you lay out blocks, each color meticulously stamped by hand, easy. Roller pin, a design on 2 metal roller plates, and you just roll the fabric through, and the vertical design comes out on the muslin. Here's a new type of cotton used for shoes and breeches called Nanking. If you can see the texture, you can see it's very tough. Dyes extremely well, and is very comparable in texture to denim. This first originated in the Chinese city of Nanking. So Nanking is not a fabric per se, it is a type of cotton fabric called Nanking, obviously. We also see a rise in imports from China of cashmere, which is excellent for shawls, which were first worn by women of the East, adapted in the West. As you can see, there can be no women's Empire fashion without the shawl. We start to see the revolution come to a head here in men's clothing. More subtle, no longer competing with women's fashion in color, embroideries, or accessories. As you can see the evolution when we get to 1800, how it's more egalitarian, somber, dark clothing, where fashion is measured in tailoring and crisp, immaculate lines. Fashion? We have no time for fashion. We have wars to fight. We can't fight wars and worry about fashion. Just give me anything off the rack. Also, the Industrial Revolution is on the way. We start to see large steam-driven machines. The good thing about these is, from the owner's part, is they could be operated by unskilled labor. The bad thing about it from the craftsperson's point of view is they could be operated by unskilled labor. So we start to see a competition for jobs, low wages. Many of those hired were independent weavers and spinners that were put out of work. Two things that helped us along, the cotton gin and the Jacquard loom. Cotton gin, as you may know from grade school, invented by Eli Whitney in 1793, and which saved the cotton industry. Before, you would have these seed pods and seeds, and you had to get the cotton out, and it was just terrible. If you ever played with raw cotton, just trying to separate this chaff and clean from this ball from the cotton. So it works very well on short fiber cotton indigenous to the southern United States. I mean, just tenfold, 20-fold increase the production of cotton or the processing of cotton. A boon to the southern economy. So it was a good thing, but it was also a bad thing. It was determining that slavery was not profitable. It wasn't really a good economic situation. It's not, but it wasn't practical in the long term economically. And it was starting to die out. There were plantations who were planting indigo as well to try to supplant cotton. And then the cotton gin comes along, and that changes everything. So there's good and there's terrible, terrible bad. Jacquard loom, invented in 1801 by Joseph Marie Jacquard. This is a device that uses punch cards to create repeating patterns in fabric. So, excuse me. It is steam driven, it can be, and it can be worked quickly by unskilled labor. Paradoxically, it was England who exploited the invention because France's textile industry was depressed due to war. But it was a big boon in weaving, and it did not need you did not need skilled weavers to use it. Now, whenever there's progress, there's winners and there's losers, and of course, the losers are usually the people whose livelihoods are supplanted by the progress. And this happened in England in 1811, a rebellion known as the Luddite movement, disgruntled textile artisans. They were named for a character out of folklore, Ned Ludd, who was a craftsman, I believe. So they protested by destroying the powered looms, the Jacquard looms, cotton gins, and so forth. And the way they would do this is they would take their shoes, they would wear these wooden work shoes called sabots, and you would throw them into the looms, which would destroy the looms. They did this not only in England, but in France as well, and they had a name for it, sabotage. The Luddite movement became so strong they clashed and opened with the British Army. And in 1812, the government and the army said, enough is enough, and they executed some of the Luddites, and they deported the rest to Australia mostly, I believe. That was the Botany Bay colony. So you see there, and to this day, whenever you talk about somebody being a Luddite, that just means they don't know how to work modern technology. They can't use a phone. Your mom's a Luddite because she doesn't know how to unlock her phone or use a computer. So that's where the word came from, is from this movement in 1811. We have to talk about fashion publications because they explode mostly in England. You recall the Galerie de Mode and Cabinet de Mode in France. They ceased publication at the beginning of the French Revolution. Big surprise there. So we start to see monthly publications from London, mostly from engravers and publishers who borrow this format, this new revolutionary format where you put everything together, different things under two covers, and this is known as a magazine. And the first periodical to use this term was the Gentleman's Magazine, started in 1731. Here you see a cover, enormously popular. I'm going to give you a little background because it does bear in what we're talking about. You see, it was a digest. Magazine means storehouse, by the way. A digest of topics, news, literature aimed at a specific group. Think GQ for the 18th century Rococo set. Subjects of interest to men ranging from commodity prices to true crime stories to Latin poetry. So other publishers took this digest form and said, hey, we can take these fashion plates from French periodicals, and we can make influential magazines for ladies, like the Ladies' Magazine, the Gallery of Fashion, and La Belle Assemblée. The Ladies' Magazine, or entertaining companion for the fair sex, appropriate solely to their use and amusement, ran for 62 years, so they must have gotten it right. Aimed at middle-class women, it was more than a collection of houseplates. Think Good Housekeeping or Better Homes and Garden. Tips on beauty and makeup, patterns for accessories, description of outfits worn by the nobility, and then short stories contributed by readers. Here you can see, but they also had fashion plates, as you can see here in this illustration on the right. Gallery of Fashion, started by a German engraver. It was all fashion plates without any additional articles, and you can see That just wasn't going to fly in this modern day and age. It lasted 8 years, which is not bad, but not like the ladies' book magazine. Come on. And La Belle Ensemble was similar to that, except similar to the ladies' magazine, except aimed at wealthier readers. Usually 2 to 3 fashion plates, sheet music, embroidery pattern, and novelty of fiction by established writers because they can pay better. Mary Shelley was a contributor. It ran for 1806 to 1832 and then merged with the ladies' magazine. So these are very influential publications. This concludes part A. Part 2 will pick up with clothing for both men and women and a few examples. Thank you.